Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 26. This was a bit of a hard one, not gonna lie. I had to record it 3 times, because I kept being unhappy with the end result. First, most things went pretty well, but then right at the end, our deuteron fuel cell factory completely ran out of deuterium, and if I left it there, we would have had to let the game run for a good couple hours to salvage the situation. Then I tried to make sure that the fuel cells are kept going, and for that, I had to do quite a substantial upgrade to the Fractionator setup, and I'll be honest, it was a complete and utter mess. So, for the third attempt, I decided to quickly take care of the small things around the base, and then spend the rest of the video trying to do a proper, high-volume deuterium factory. Before we get started, I would love it if you subscribe to the channel, and clicking the like button will let me know that this video was worth making. If you want to help me make a living off this one day, please consider becoming a channel member, where you will get an early access to the videos as I make them, and for a one-time donation, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description. But enough talking, let's get into it. Okay, before we do anything else, we really need to ensure that the fusion power cells are kept flowing. First, we upped the delivery threshold in the strange matter factory, so it stopped hogging all the deuterium, and then went to the fuel cell array, and made that be the higher priority. After today's intervention, we will hopefully have enough for both, but power does need to get first dibs on the stuff. Okay, the power will chug along for now. Another incredibly important thing we need to deal with is the missile launcher ring on Manura. When I first placed it down, they were facing backwards. During my failed attempts at this episode, I did encounter situations where the fog managed to break through in certain places. If they are facing the right way, and they have more power to fire more reliably, then we will be able to hold them off a whole lot better. Before we go there, we need to make sure we have enough turrets to fully finish the circle, and we should also take a stack of windmills with us, so we can ensure a reliable power supply for the launchers. "33 of them should be plenty enough to finish up the ring. That's all we need to accomplish there today, so no need to go overboard." We will start placing turrets next to the tower, and this time, we will make sure that they are actually facing away from the center of the circle. Until now, their first couple shots all went backwards, drastically increasing their travel time to the target. Now that the enemy is starting to pick up steam, we need them to be as efficient as physically possible. And since we are increasing the number of turrets quite a bit, we need to make sure they have the power to shoot consistently. And here, we can start replacing the old turrets, and placing them back down, this time with the correct orientation. At this point, we were pretty much done. But, we had an impending attack coming, so I wanted for it to trigger, and see how we would fare. Glad to see it was dispatched pretty much instantly. But, It seems the enemy base was now fully focused on that mining outpost. We could easily deal with the waves upon waves going there, but I was afraid that it would overwhelm our missile production capabilities. To stop the flood, I'm afraid that base has to go. It's a real shame it had to come to this. That base was already level 9, the highest I've ever seen a dark fog base get to, but it was doing more harm than good. I also didn't like how this base was causing a constant drain on our missile supply, so I decided to destroy it as well. I would feel better if we only ever used ammo if absolutely necessary. Now that's more like it. The enemy went to attack, got destroyed, and things were calm again. Having bases too close to the turret ring is something that we might need to check on from time to time. There was another thing that we needed to deal with before we could get started on the new fractionators. Our mining was struggling to keep the furnaces well supplied, and I would feel better if things were chugging along as best they can while we are busy with the deuterium production. So I quickly went back to Juno, picked up the advanced miners we had in the box, and went to Vulcan to take care of things. So, let's check which resources we need to focus on while we're here. Titanium is definitely on the top of the list. But it seems copper is also struggling, and stone could also be better if I'm honest. Well, even with the advanced miners, setting up the mining operations on a whole planet is definitely a time-consuming and boring process. So if you don't mind, I will now engage in even faster fast forwarding, so we can get through this part a bit quicker. Initially I only wanted to get to the point where we can get enough stuff to keep the smelters running at a decent pace, but over time, I had so few deposits left that I just went for full strip mining. Also, you will see me replacing basic miners on top of a couple deposits here. That is because advanced miners are simply faster. And we are only working with just 2 levels of vein utilization. They will only get better as we progress through that line of research. Here, I had to move the shield emitter over a tiny bit to gain access to all the copper nodes, so this part of the planet was momentarily undefended. Thankfully, we didn't have any relay stations attempting a landing. Anyways, that stone deposit was the last one I deal with today. Technically, we still have a single patch of coal left to exploit, so we are not mining absolutely everything, but for all intents and purposes, we are now strip mining Vulcan. And before we get to work on the fractionators, I wanted to make extra sure the fuel kept flowing, so I doubled up on the array, and copied the assemblers over to the other side. First, I had to move a couple belts around to make room, but I think we can all agree that ensuring a steady power supply is kind of important. Now, I didn't turn the belt going to the fusion reactors around. That was intentional. I decided to place a second tower at the end of the reactor stacks, so we can ship out proliferated fuel cells, so we are not just using them on Juno, but in every outpost we have around the cluster. Also, let's remember to fill the lakes in with foundations the next time. I had to make 2 attempts at this before I got it right. Okay, the fuel cells are being made at double speed now, and we are diverting every single cell toward the reactors at this point. Next, we need a second tower, so once the generators had their fill, we can ship the rest to other places. While we were on Vulcan, the local reactors were starved of fuel, but with this increased production capacity, it's only a matter of time before that place is fully powered again. Okay, I think we are ready to get to work on the new Fractionator setup. The basic idea will be based on the mini loops we already built the last time we had to increase the production, but this time, it will receive a small twist that will help ensure the absolute maximum efficiency that is physically achievable. Well, almost the absolute maximum. If we used proliferators, we could make it go at double speed, but we wouldn't get any extra production from it, would just be able to achieve the same result with fewer facilities. Unlike assemblers, fractionators only get a better chance at turning hydrogen into deuterium. 2% instead of 1. We wouldn't use any less hydrogen, wouldn't get any extra deuterium. It would just be faster. I think I can live without that. Anyways, before I got to the actual designing and building, I made sure to have a good number of the buildings we will need to make this work. We will need the fractionators of course, but we will also need an equal number of belt splitters, and twice as many stackers. These numbers might be a bit of a tip-off as to how this new design will look like. Anyways, to make the fractionators, I had to quickly go back to Vulcan, and give the glass furnaces some extra drones, so they can import the raw stone they need from the local miners. And since I was here, and I had a lot of drones, I also made sure every other tower was also fully stocked with them. Then, I picked up the glass I needed, started crafting the 100 fractionators, and flew back to make the other buildings we will need. Well, I did check on the local reactors, but Juno was still struggling to move them off planet. The thing is, making rockets require a lot of these fuel rods, and it takes time to fill up that tower, so it will take a bit of time before they start to trickle off the planet. Well, it seems we had a bit of a problem with the copy pasting, and the central output inserters didn't make it through. I guess the reversed belt got things mixed up. But it's better now, all the assemblers are working at full tilt. And the rocket factory is almost full of fuel, so Vulcan will spring back to life in a couple moments for sure. As I've said, we will need twice as many stackers as we did fractionators, so we got enough materials to make 200 of them. We did struggle with the processors, so I quickly paid a visit to upgrade the assemblers there. Well, I think it's time we got to work. For real this time. To be able to build the thing I had in mind, we will need to build in one of the wider grid belts, just above the equator. That one has enough room to accommodate the design. Right in between the two shield emitters should be perfect. First, we set up the hydrogen stacking. It's the same exact one we used before. We feed the first one with Mark III belts, then we move the double stacks into the second stacker with a Mark II belt to ensure zero gaps, and then we move the quadruple stacked items on regular Mark IIIs again. This will ensure that whatever we put into the system, it's always going to be stacked as high as possible. Once we get the tower stacking research, this step will be unnecessary, but for now we have to include it. So, here come the actual Fractionator loop we will be working with on this design. As I've said, it is very similar to the one we had used before, but it differs in two very important ways. And those ways are on the sides of the loop in the form of those two stackers. This is why we needed twice as many of them as we did Fractionators. Adding these will ensure that the mini loops are kept fully stacked to level 4 at all times. As the mini loops start to get thinned out by the Fractionators, the splitters will drop in extra hydrogen to plug any gaps. Now, I did try to see if we can achieve the absolute best performance out of the Fractionators if we fed the hydrogen without stacking them beforehand at the tower. We could achieve about 80 to 90% of the maximum, but not quite 100%. If we work with pre-stacked hydrogen, then we can get a constant 100% efficiency. Before I start stamping down the template, I made sure we can repeat it comfortably. Copy-pasting tends to complain if we try to place more than one tile of belts on top of each other, so they needed to be a very specific length. There. The different belts only overlap with a single tile, so we can tile this easily. Now, as you might have guessed, I already tested this setup quite extensively. I already know that we can build these columns 12 Fractionators long, and we would get a deuterium line that is just about fully saturated. We only have room for 10, thanks to the shield generators, but in case you want to copy this, just know that you can get away with building 12. I suppose we could squeeze more lines onto a single tower. The belts feeding the loops can be a lot longer than this, so we could free up some ports on the tower. But I didn't want to start experimenting now, I just wanted to get this done. Anyways, this particular arrangement uses 3 tower ports per stack, so we can have 4 of these per tower. Only need about 1400 more belts, and it should be done. Okay. All we need now is to hook up the columns to the tower. And we're out of belts. We need some Mark IIs anyways, so let's restock real quick. If there is a drawback to this design, it does use a whole lot of belts. Here we go. The big moment. Let's bring this place to life. And it's up and running. It will take a bit of a warm-up period for it to settle into the maximum efficiency, but it shouldn't take too long. And in case you're wondering, we are looking at that 7,200 fractionate per minute number. If we only had hydrogen with no stacking go through them, we could only achieve 1,800 at max. With quadruple stacking, it jumps up to that magical 7,200. For now, it fluctuates a bit, but over time it will settle into a stable 7,200. Now, we did have trouble making enough deuterium before, so I thought we might as well double this up. I turned off the hydrogen tap in the old tower, and made room for another one on the next hemisphere. Damn! Without the last blueprint research, we are just barely above the building limit. Oh well, we can just do this in stages. Obviously, we don't have enough stuff to build this entire thing twice. That's why I turned off the old tower. Once that place is done using the hydrogen it already got, we will demolish that place, and use those old fractionators for the new setup. Only 20 belts left. Sure managed to cut this one close. The old loop's emptying out nicely, but I want to get it done, so I decided to siphon off the last remaining hydrogen, so we can recycle the buildings quicker. Might as well do the same with the others, although their mini loops mean we will need to deal with a lot of leftover hydrogen as we pick things up. Technically, we could drain every loop individually, but there are just too many. So we will need to drop off the excess often as we dismantle things. Alright then, the old fractionators are gone, we are now only using the new ones exclusively. And it seems the first fractionators managed to settle into the maximum of 7,200 dice rolls per minute. As I've said, without those stackers, we would only be able to get as high as 1,800, so this is a huge improvement. At the end of all our efforts, we are only missing a little over 100 stackers to finish the second tower, so I decided to quickly take care of it, before we call it a day. Okay, I don't think I will make you sit through the crafting and placing of these stackers today, we will pick things up in the next episode. Speaking of, now that our deuterium production is more or less sorted, we have one last thing we need to deal with to make it really do what we need, and that's the harvesting of yet another gas giant. We are already exploiting 2 of them, but it's just not enough to keep both fractionator setups going 24/7. Plus, if we choose to go for another deuterium one, then we can lower the strain placed on the local production, which should leave more hydrogen to go to other processes, like the Casimir crystals. And sorting all this deuterium out was even more important, since the weapons we want to use as our main way of defenses against attacks from the central hive, they also require it in their ammo production. Once that thing is churning out the ammo at a constant rate, and our defenses are ready, then we can start building the sphere. Anyways, if you haven't done it already, I would love it if you subscribe to the channel, and clicking the like button will also help letting me know that the video was worth making. If you would like to help me make a living off this one day, please consider becoming a channel member, where you will get an early access to the videos as I make them. And if you want to give a one-time donation, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description. Thank you for your support, and I will see you in the next one.